Lieutenant Commander NIP Park stood frozen at the viewport, her breath creating small circles of fog on the reinforced glass. The massive ship floating among the asteroids didn't make sense. Her scout vessel, the Sparrow, was small but packed with the latest censored technology the Earth fleet could offer, yet the readings coming back were making her question everything she knew about human technological development. Run the scan again, she ordered, keeping her voice steady despite the growing tension in her chest. I've already run it 3 times, Commander, replied the artificial intelligence system. Its voice was calm and slightly feminine, programmed to sound reassuring. Results remain consistent. The vessel is of human design, but incorporates technology approximately 200 years beyond our current capabilities. Park ran her fingers through her short black hair, a habit when faced with puzzles that defied explanation. That's not possible. The data suggests otherwise, the AI responded simply. The strange vessel hung there, dark against the backdrop of stars, occasionally catching glint of distant sunlight. When it rotated slightly, its hull was unlike anything Park had ever seen, not just in its sleek, almost predatory shape, but in the way it seemed to absorb rather than reflect sensor probes. Jaeon, what do you make of this? Park called to her second-in-command, Lieutenant Jaeon Baek, floated over in the zero-gravity environment, his movements practiced and efficient. He had been studying the sensor data on his tablet, his normally cheerful face now serious. The power signatures are minimal but stable. If I had to guess, I'd say it's in some kind of standby mode, he said. But Commander, these energy patterns, they're unlike anything I have ever studied. The efficiency levels alone would revolutionize our fleet if we could replicate them. Park nodded slowly. The Sparrow had been on a routine patrol of the outer asteroid belt, looking for illegal mining operations. Finding an impossible ship wasn't in her mission parameters. Any life signs, she asked. None detected, the I replied. Environmental systems appear operational but minimal. Atmosphere is maintained at levels suitable for human life, so it's waiting for someone, Park murmured. She studied the vessel more carefully now. Despite its advanced design, there was something undeniably familiar about it. The way certain lines flowed, the placement of what appeared to be weapon systems. It followed human military design philosophy, just taken to an extreme. She'd never imagined. Look at the markings near what I assume is the command section, she said, pointing. Jen squinted, then adjusted the viewport mag signification. That looks like an Earth fleet insignia, but not quite right. He was correct. The familiar starburst pattern of the Earth fleet was there, but with additional elements Park didn't recognize, as if the symbol had evolved over time. A future version, Jen suggested, giving voice to the thought neither of them wanted to fully consider. Time travel isn't possible, Park stated firmly. There must be another explanation. Perhaps it's an experimental prototype. Offered 9 him from her station at communications. Something top secret that command hasn't briefed us on. Park considered this. It was more plausible than a ship from the future, but still didn't explain the technological gap. Earth Fleet's research division was excellent, but they didn't make 200-year leaps overnight. We should report this to command immediately, Jen suggested. Park felt a strange RELU rise within her. Standard protocol was clear. Unknown vessels were to be reported coordinates tent, and the scout ship was to maintain a safe distance until reinforcements arrived. But something about this ship called to her, a mystery that demanded personal investigation. We don't know what we're dealing with yet, she said slowly. If we call this in, half the fleet will descend on this location within hours. Whatever secrets this ship holds might be contained by over-eager admirals. Jaeon looked surprised. Are you suggesting we investigate first against protocol? Park turned to face her small crew, just 4 of them aboard the Sparrow. All were watching her with varying degrees of concern and curiosity. I'm suggesting we gather more information before making a potentially career-altering call. She clarified this discovery could be significant. I want to understand what we're dealing with before it becomes a political or military football. Engineer Suo Lee spoke up from where he'd been analyzing the technical data. Commander, I've been comparing the whole composition to known materials. It's not matching anything in our database. The alloy appears to be at least partly composed of elements we can identify. but structured in ways I've never seen. This only deepened the mystery. Park made her decision. Jaehyun prepare a boarding team. Yumi and Soo-hyun will maintain command of the Sparrow and be ready to extract us or call for help if needed. A boarding team. Hyun looked alarmed. Commander, regulations state. I know what regulations state, Park interrupted, but they didn't anticipate this. She gestured at the impossible ship. We'll take full precautions, pressure suits, weapons, constant communication. If anything seems off, we return immediately. The crew exchanged glances, but didn't argue further. In the 3 years Park had commanded the Sparrow, she had never led them astray. Her judgment was trusted even when it occasionally bent protocol. How do we even dock with it? Jun asked. Practically, we don't know. If their systems are compatible with ours, we don't dock, Park replied. We go EVA and find an entry point. Suho scan for airlocks or maintenance hatches. As the engineer worked, Park continued studying the vessel. Its design was elegant but clearly built for war. Weapon emplacements were integrated so seamlessly they almost disappeared into the hull lines, but her trained eye could identify them, and they were like nothing she had ever seen. Found a potential entry point, Suvo announced after several minutes of scanning what appears to be an auxiliary airlock on the vessel's underside. It's not active, but the surrounding area shows minimal power signatures. Good work, Park nodded. Suit up. We leave in 15 minutes. As they prepared their EVA gear, Park couldn't shake the feeling that this discovery would change everything. The ship shouldn't existed. Represented technology humanity wouldn't develop for centuries, yet here it was. Commander, the AI interrupted her thoughts. I've detected a power surge in the unknown vessel. It appears to be activating additional systems. Park rushed back to the viewport. Sure enough, soft lights were now visible along the mysterious ship's hull. It was waking up. Has it detected us? She asked sharply. Unknown, the eye replied, but the timing suggests it may be responding to our scans. Park made a quick decision. Change of plans. We move now before it fully activates. Jun, Suo airlocks in 5 minutes. Hyun, be ready to pull us out fast if needed. As she sealed her pressure suit, Park knew she was making a choice that might end her career or worse, but the pull of discovery was too strong to resist. That ship had answers she needed. We investigated first, she repeated to herself as she checked her oxygen levels. Then we decide what Earth fleet needs to know. The airlock mechanism yielded with surprising ease. Park had expected to spend hours trying to interface with the alien technology, but as soon as Suho touched the external panel, lines of soft blue light traced across its surface, and the door slid open silently. It's like it was expecting us. Jaehyun whispered, his voice tight with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Park hesitated only briefly before shining her light into the open chamber. Stay alert. We don't know what we're walking into. The 3 officers entered the airlock, their magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor. Once they were inside, the outer door closed behind them without any command. Park felt her heart rate spike, but forced herself to remain calm as the chamber pressurized. Atmosphere analysis, she asked, her hand resting on her sidearm. Suo checked his handheld scanner. Oxygen nitrogen mix perfectly breathable. Temperature 20 degrees T. It's creating Earth normal conditions. Keep your helmets on for now, Park ordered. We don't take unnecessary risks. The inner door opened, revealing a dimly lit corridor that seemed to stretch deep into the vessel. As they stepped forward, lights activated progressively ahead of them, illuminating their path. The ship is responding to our presence, Jan noted. It has to be some kind of motion or heat detection system. Park nodded, studying the sleek walls with their embedded lighting strips. Look at the construction. No visible seams, no maintenance panels. It's as if the entire ship was grown rather than assembled. They moved cautiously down the corridor, boots making soft sounds against the floor. The gravity felt normal. Another surprise for a seemingly unpowered vessel. Commander Suho called out, his voice filled with wonder. Look at these markings. Park approached what appeared to be a door beside it. Elegant symbols were etched into the wall, material symbols that initially appeared alien but resolved into a highly stylized form of Korean script. As she stared at them, engine room, she read aloud, surprised. This is Korean but evolved somehow. More evidence it's of Earth origin, Jaehyun said. But from when and how did it get here? Park placed her hand near the door, and just as with the airlock it responded to her proximity, sliding open to reveal a cavernous space beyond the engine room was unlike anything they had ever seen. Instead of the expected fusion reactors, or even antimatter containment systems, a large crystalline structure dominated the center of the room, pulsing with a soft blue-white light. What is that? Gen breath Suo scanner was working overtime trying to make sense of the readings. I don't even have terminology for this. It's not fusion, not antimatter. The energy signature is clean, impossibly efficient. Park approached the crystal cautiously. As she did, a holographic interface materialized in front of her, displaying data streams in that same evolved Korean script. It's activating for us, she murmured. Suho, can you make sense of this? The engineer moved closer, his expertise in propulsion systems making him the best qualified to understand what they were seeing, but he shook his head in bewilderment. This references principles I've never even heard of. Look at this part. It mentions something called dimensional folding for FTL travel, not warp technology, not the jump gates. We use something completely different. Park felt a chill despite her temperature-regulated suit. Let's continue exploring. We need to find a command center. They found their way through more corridors, each revealing technological marvels beyond their understanding. Doors opened at their approach, systems illuminated as they passed. It was as if the ship were gradually waking up, responding to their presence, not as intruders but as welcome guests. These interfaces, Suo whispered as they entered what appeared to be a research law. He ran his gloved fingers over a console that came to life at his touch, displaying complex schematics. They're responding to us. But I've never seen anything like this. The technology it feels like it was designed for human use, but centuries ahead of our capabilities. Park watched as the schematic shifted, seeming to adapt to Suo's presence. It's almost like the ship is learning, adjusting to our level of technological understanding. After exploring several more sections, they finally located what had to be a command center. Unlike the utilitarian design of Earth fleet vessels, this bridge was elegant and minimalist. A central chair faced a panoramic viewport, with smaller stations arranged in a semicircle. No physical controls were visible, just smooth surfaces that likely concealed holographic interfaces. As Park approached the central chair, something caught her eye: a small recess in the armrest, perfectly sized to hold what appeared to be a data crystal resting beside it. The crystal glowed with the same blue-white light as the engine core. What do you think this is? She asked, picking up the crystal carefully. Some kind of data storage, maybe, Jae-young suggested, but nothing like our current technology. Park examined the recess thoughtfully. It looks designed to hold this crystal. Maybe it's meant to be inserted, Commander Jae-young cautioned. We don't know what that might activate. Park the risks. They had already gone well beyond protocol by boarding the vessel. The ship had shown no hostile intent. In fact, it seemed designed to accommodate human visitors. We came here for answers, she decided with careful precision. She placed the crystal into the waiting slot. The effect was immediate. The command center fully illuminated, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the room. Within seconds, the translucent image of a woman appeared before them. She wore what resembled a military uniform, but with insignia they didn't recognize. Her bearing was unmistakably that of a high-ranking officer. I am Admiral Julie of the Earth Defense Force, year 2387. The hologram stated in clear, unaccented Korean. This vessel, the EDF Impossible, has been sent back to prevent an extinction level event. Park felt her knees weaken. 2387, more than 3 centuries. In the future, if you are viewing this message, then our calculations were correct. The hologram continued. The Impossible has reached its targeted temporal coordinates. This ship represents the pinnacle of human engineering and innovation, designed specifically for this mission. The 3 officers stood in stunned silence as Admiral Lee's image gestured, causing a star map to appear beside her. In approximately 11 months from your present time, an incursion will begin in this sector. The entities responsible are not like anything humanity has previously encountered in my timeline. We were unprepared. Earth fell within weeks. Villians died. The star map changed to show what appeared to be battle simulations. Earth fleet vessels being systematically destroyed by weapons beyond their understanding. A small group of survivors, including myself, managed to develop the technology necessary for temporal displacement. We could not send back an army or evacuate our people, but we could send this ship. With all the technological advancements of 3 centuries compressed into one vessel, Park found her voice at last. This can't be real. Time travel is theoretical at best. The hologram paused as if anticipating the objection. I understand your skepticism in your time temporal mechanics are barely understood, but I assure you this message in this ship are very real, as is the threat approaching Earth. Admiral Lee's expression grew more urgent. Your most critical task now is to locate Captain Sunwoo. He has already been sent back through a different method and has been preparing for the Impossible's arrival. He alone has been trained to fully operate this vessel's systems. The hologram looked directly at Park, creating the unsettling delusion that this woman from the future was actually seeing her. Find Captain Sunwoo. He will know what to do. The coordinates of his last known location are now downloading to this ship's navigation system. With those final words, the message ended, leaving the 3 officers standing in silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Commander Jen finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What do we do with this information? Park stared at the now empty space where Admiral Lee's image had stood. An extinction-level threat approaching Earth. A ship from the future sent back to prevent it. A mysterious Captain Sunwoo, who supposedly had the knowledge to operate this impossible vessel. First, we verify if those coordinates actually downloaded, she said, practical despite her shock. Then we need to decide who to trust with this information. Suo had already moved to what appeared to be a navigation console. The coordinates are here, Commander. They point to a location on Europa. Park frowned. Jupiter's moon? Yes, specifically the research outpost near the southern ice shelf. Park took a deep breath, making her decision. We take this ship with us, learn as much as we can on the way to Europa, and we find this Captain Sunwoo before we contact Earth Command. You believe the message? John asked quietly. Park looked around at the command center of a ship that shouldn't exist yet. I believe we found something extraordinary. Whether it's really from the future or not, this technology alone could change everything. And if there's even a small chance that Admiral Lee's warning is genuine. She didn't need to finish the thought. The implications were clear. Let's figure out how to fly an impossible. She said. The Impossible moved through space with an elegance that defied its massive size. Park stood on the bridge watching as Jupiter grew larger in the view screen. After 2 weeks of learning the ship's basic functions, they had managed to master its navigation systems enough to set course for Europa. Still no response from Earth Command. Park asked, though she already knew the answer. Jaeon shook his head. Nothing. Either our communications aren't compatible with current systems, or they're deliberately ignoring us. Park finished. The thought had been troubling her since their 3rd attempt to contact headquarters after discovering the impossible and hearing Admiral Lee's message. They had tried to report in, only to be met with silence. Maybe they think we've been compromised, Suo suggested from his station. He had taken to the ship's engineering systems with remarkable speed, as if the advanced technology somehow made intuitive sense to him. A scout ship reporting a vessel from the future. I wouldn't believe it either. Park nodded grimly. Which means we're on our own until we find Captain Sunwoo. The name had been bothering her since they'd heard it. Captain Sun Wukang had been something of a legend in the Earth fleet, a brilliant tactical officer who had disappeared 3 years earlier. During what should have been a routine patrol near the outer planets, his ship had reported an unusual energy signature. Then all contact was lost. After months of searching, he was officially declared killed in action. But if Admiral Lee's hologram was to be believed, Sunwoo wasn't dead at all. He had somehow been sent back in time separately from the Impossible, and had been waiting on Europa for the ship's arrival. Approaching Europa, Jeon announced the coordinates point to the research station on the southern ice shelf. We should be in visual range soon. Park felt tension building in her chest. What would they find on that frozen moon? A man who had supposedly lived through a future that hadn't happened yet, or just another dead end? I've been thinking about something, Suo said quietly. If Captain Sunmo was sent back 3 years ago and has been waiting all this time. Why didn't he warn Earth about the coming threat? It was a good question, one that had occurred to Park. As well, maybe he tried and wasn't believed, or maybe there are rules to this time travel business that we don't understand. The voice came from behind them, unfamiliar and unexpected. All three officers spun around, weapons instantly drawn. A man stood in the doorway to the bridge. He wore simple civilian clothes. Sunmo shook his head. Politics. Bureaucracy in my timeline. Earth's leadership wasted precious months arguing about how to respond to the initial contact. By the time they mobilized a proper defense, it was too late. The resistance chose you, Commander Park, because your service record showed you as someone who would act decisively when faced with an extraordinary situation like boarding an impossible ship and stealing it. Park said dry. Exactly. For the first time, some smiled genuinely. You've already proven them right. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the ship's sensors. Energy spike detected near Pluto's orbit, Jim reported, checking the readings. I don't even know how to describe this pattern. Sunyu was immediately on his feet, moving to the console with practiced familiarity. Let me see. He studied the display, his expression growing grave. It's happening earlier than in my timeline. They're already starting to probe our reality. The invasion is beginning, Park asked, alarm rising in her voice. Not yet, just reconnaissance, but it means we have less time than I thought. Sunyu looked at each of them in turn. You need to decide now. Do you trust me enough to follow my lead? Because what comes next will require all of us working together, and there won't be time for doubts. Park studied the man before her. Everything about this situation defied logic and protocol. A ship from the future, a man who had lived through a war that hadn't happened yet, an enemy beyond comprehension approaching Earth. But the sensor readings were real, the impossible was real, and something was happening near Pluto. What do you need us to do? She asked. Relief flashed across Sunk face. First, we need to fully activate the impossible weapon systems. Then we need to contact an ally I've been working with on Earth, someone with enough influence to prepare our defenses without causing panic. Who? Jae-yun asked. Admiral Jin Boy. Park's eyebrows rose. Admiral Choi was the head of Earth Fleet Intelligence. Notoriously paranoid and difficult to access. He knows about you. He knows something is coming. Sunyu replied. I've been feeding him information anonymously for years. Building a case with the impossible is proof he'll listen as they work to bring the ship's primary systems fully online, Park observed Sunwoo. There was something haunting about watching him work, the easy familiarity he had with technology that shouldn't exist, yet the way his hands moved across interfaces designed centuries in the future. You really lived it, didn't you? She asked quietly, when they had a moment alone. The war, the defeat, all of it. Sunyu paused, his eyes meeting hers. Every day, every loss, every failed strategy, and desperate last stand. I watched Earth burn, Commander. I won't let it happen again. The conviction in his voice erased any remaining doubt. Whatever impossible journey had brought Sun Muk-kang and the ship named Impossible into her path, Park was now committed to seeing it through. You found it, Sunwoo had said when he first appeared on the bridge. The ship they promised would come out. It was time to fulfill that promise. Admiral Jinwo's office was exactly what Park had expected, minimal, practical, and secured with more layers of protection than seemed reasonable. The trip to Earth had been tense, with the Impossible's advanced cloaking systems keeping them hidden from regular fleet patrols. Now, sitting across from the most powerful intelligence officer in the solar system, Park felt strangely calm. The worst that could happen was no longer arrest or court-martial, but the end of humanity itself. You understand why I'm skeptical, Admiral Choi said, his weathered face betraying nothing as he examined the data. Crystal Sunwoo had given him a ship from the future, a time-traveling officer, an interdimensional invasion. Yes, sir, Park replied. I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't seen the evidence myself. Choi's eyes shifted to Sunwoo, who stood by the window looking out at Earth Fleet headquarters. And you claim to be Captain Sun Muk-kang, despite being significantly older than the officer who disappeared 3 years ago. I am him, Sunwoo confirmed, just not the version of him you knew. Show him, Park suggested quietly. Sunwoo nodded and rolled up his sleeve, revealing a series of scars on his forearm. Not ordinary scars, they formed precise patterns, almost like circuit boards etched into his flesh neural interfaces. He explained design to link directly with the impossible systems every ship commander in my time had them after we realized conventional controls were too slow to combat the visitors. The visitors, Choi repeated the term Sunwo had used to describe the invaders, a rather benign name for entities that supposedly destroyed Earth. We called them that because they never communicated, never explained their purpose. Sunu said they simply visited. And Choi leaned forward, his skepticism momentarily replaced by curiosity. Tell me about them, not the technical details. I've seen the sensor data. Tell me what they were. Sue's face darkened, and Park could see memories surfacing, painful ones. Imagine a predator that doesn't just hunt your body, but your reality, he began slowly. The visitors exist partially in dimensions we can't perceive. When they first appeared near Pluto, we thought they were simply an unknown species, perhaps from beyond our solar system. We sent diplomatic missions, none returned. He walked to the Admiral's desk and activated a small projector. He brought a holographic image, appeared strange shifting shapes that hurt the eyes to look at directly. This is the clearest image we ever captured. Their physical form in our dimension is just a projection, a small part of their true nature. They don't want resources as we understand them. They consume possibility. Possibility, frown, the potential energy of choices not yet made, of futures that might exist. Sun's voice grew tight. They feed on branching timelines, on quantum uncertainty, and Earth with its billions of conscious minds making trillions of decisions. Every moment is a feast beyond imagining. Park watched the Admiral's face. He was still skeptical, but his trained mind was clearly processing the implications. When they attacked in force, some who continued, our weapons passed through them like they were smoke. Conventional explosives, lasers, even nuclear detonations, all ineffective because they were only affecting the portion of the visitors that existed in our reality. He displayed another hologram, Earth, with strange dark patches spreading across its surface. These aren't attack sites in the traditional sense. They're places where our reality was being consumed. Dimensional thinning. We called it the boundaries between realities breaking down. And you survived this? Choi asked. Some of us, we retreated to deep space installations, research outposts for 30 years. We developed technologies to fight back, to understand the nature of dimensional boundaries and how to strengthen them, to create weapons that could affect beings existing partly outside our reality. Sunwo gestured toward the window, toward the distant shape of the impossible in its secured berth. That ship represents the culmination of everything. We learned it is composed of materials that exist simultaneously in multiple dimensional states. Its sensors can detect reality distortions, and its weapons show me. Choi said firmly, back on board the impossible. They gathered in what Sunmo called the tactical center, a room deeper in the ship than the bridge, surrounded by protective layers of the strange multi-dimensional alloy that formed the hull. This is where the real work happens, Sunmo explained, activating the room systems with a gesture. Holographic displays sprang to life around them, showing schematics that made Park's head hurt to look at, geometries that seemed to fold in on themselves impossibly. I lived decades in their timeline, Sunu explained. As he manipulated the displays, I was selected for this mission because of my background in theoretical physics. Before joining the fleet, I'm the only one who knows how to operate its full capabilities because I helped design them. Park studied one of the weapon schematics floating nearby. These systems are beyond theoretical. There's nothing in current physics that even suggests this should be possible. That's our only advantage. Sunwoo nodded. A weapon they cannot predict because it shouldn't exist, yet the visitors can sense conventional attacks before they happen. They exist partially outside linear time, but this ship, these weapons, they're blind to them. He brought up a new display, a simulation of the weapon system in action. It showed energy patterns that seemed to ripple between dimensions, creating cascading effects that were difficult to follow. We call it the reality anchor. Sunu said it doesn't destroy the visitors in the conventional sense. Instead, it forces them fully into our dimension, binding them to our reality, where conventional weapons can affect them. Admiral Choi, who had been silent since boarding the ship, finally spoke. And this worked in your timeline? Sunwoo's expression was grim. It worked. But we developed it too late. Earth was already lost. That's why we took the desperate step of attempting temporal displacement. One ship sent back to before first contact with the technology needed to fight them from the beginning, and one man Park added with the knowledge to use it. Sunwoo nodded. The process of sending a human back is imperfect, dangerous. I was the only volunteer to survive the procedure. Choi walked slowly around the tactical center, examining the controls, the displays, the alien geometries of the ship's design. His face revealed nothing of his thoughts. Admiral Park said quietly, I know how this sounds. If I hadn't experienced it myself, I wouldn't believe it either, but the sensor readings from Pluto's orbit match exactly what Captain Sunwoo predicted. Something is coming. I've received reports of strange phenomena from that sector, Choi admitted. Unexplained sensor ghosts, probe malfunctions, space-time distortions that our scientists can't explain. He turned to face them, but mobilizing Earth's defenses against an invisible interdimensional threat. Based on the word of a man who claims to be from the future, I'm not asking you to tell everyone the full truth. Sunwoo interrupted. Not yet, but we need to begin preparations, training crews to operate the technologies we can adapt from the impossible positioning defensive assets near the expected incursion points. How long do we have? Choi asked. Less than a year. Based on the readings we detected there earlier than in my timeline, which worries me. Either my presence or the impossibles has accelerated their timetable. Choi was silent for a long moment, weighing impossible choices. Finally he looked directly at Sunwoo. If, and I stress if, I were to believe you, what exactly would you propose we do? We can't build a fleet of these ships in less than a year. No, Sunwoo agreed, but we can modify existing vessels with fifth technology. The impossible carries manufacturing templates, theoretical frameworks that can be adapted to current engineering capabilities. We won't have a fleet of time-traveling warships, but we can create weapons that will at least slow them down. And the impossible itself, some whose expression was resolute, we lead the defense. When they come, it's what it was built for. Admiral Choi nodded slowly. I'll need time to consider all this to verify what can be verified. There's one more thing you should see, Sunwoo said, leading them deeper into the ship. They descended to a level. Park and her crew hadn't yet explored here. The ship's design shifted, becoming more clinical, almost most laboratory-like. Sunwoo led them to a sealed chamber at the end of a long corridor. This, he said as the door slid open, is why we can never let them reach Earth. Inside was a stasis field containing what appeared to be a human body, or what had once been human. The figure was partially translucent, its edges blurring into patterns similar to those they had seen in the hologram of the visitors. Where the heart should have been, strange energies pulsed and shifted. One of the first victims, Sunwoo explained, his voice tight with old pain. They don't just kill, Admiral, they transform. Every human they capture becomes a bridge, allowing more of them to cross into our reality. Choi stared at the suspended figure, his practiced composure finally cracking. Who was this? Su's eyes met the Admiral's. In my timeline, your son. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Whatever doubts Choi might still harbor, the personal impact of this revelation was evident on his face. You have 48 hours to convince me completely, Choi finally said. After that, either I help you prepare Earth's defenses, or I have all of you detained for stealing fleet property and perpetrating the most elaborate hoax in history. As they left the chamber, Park glanced back at the transformed human floating in stasis. The nightmare Sunwoo had described was becoming increasingly real, and the weight of what they faced settled heavily on her shoulders. The 6 months following Admiral Choi's decision passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Once convinced of the threat, Choi had moved with ruthless efficiency, creating a special division within Earth Fleet designated simply as Project Sentinel. Official records described it as an advanced defensive research initiative. Only a handful of high-ranking officers knew its true purpose. Park watched from the Impossible's viewport as the modified fleet ships took formation around Jupiter's orbit. 20 vessels, each retrofitted with technology derived from the future warship. They weren't as advanced as the Impossible itself, but they carried simplified versions of the reality anchors and dimensional sensors. They in position, she reported, turning to her son, sat in the command chair, He nodded, his scarred hands moving across the holographic controls with practiced ease. The mural interfaces in his arms glowed softly as they connected with the ship systems. "The rift will open within the hour," he said, his voice calm despite the tension evident in his posture. "Exactly where we predicted." Park studied the man who had become both her commanding officer and friend over these months of preparation. The haunted look in his eyes had never fully disappeared, but it had been joined by something new, hope, perhaps a chance to rewrite the history. "He had lived through. The fleet is ready," she assured him, "and Earth's orbital defenses are on standby." Convincing Earth's leadership had been challenging but ultimately successful. The strange phenomena near Pluto had increased dramatically, becoming impossible to ignore when a scientific outpost reported seeing space itself tear open. Before losing all contact, even the most skeptical officials had been forced to acknowledge the threat. John entered the bridge, now wearing the insignia of tactical officer. "Final weapons check complete. All systems operational." "Good," Sue replied. "Take your station." The bridge crew moved with quiet efficiency, each person trained extensively on the advanced systems. Park felt pride watching them, a team assembled from Earth's best, chosen for their ability to adapt to technologies beyond their time. "Commander, I'm detecting unusual space of time fluctuations," reported in Mina, who had joined their crew as a sensor specialist. "The readings match Captain Sun was predictions exactly on the main view screen." The empty space before them began to distort. It started subtly, a shimmering like heat rising from hot pavement. Then the distortion grew. The very fabric of reality seemed to stretch and tear. "Alert, the fleet." Sunwo ordered. "Calmly position reality anchors and prepare to deploy." "On my mark." Park sent the coded transmission to the waiting ships. Each moved precisely into the formation they had rehearsed countless times, creating a three-dimensional net around the growing anomaly. "Dimensional breach in progress," Mina announced, her voice steady despite the unprecedented event unfolding before them. "I'm detecting movement within the rift." The tear in space widened, revealing a swirling darkness unlike anything Park had ever seen. It wasn't simply black, it was an absence, a void that hurt the eyes to look at directly, and within that void, shapes began to move. "They're coming through," Park reported, fighting to keep her voice steady as the sensors showed multiple entities emerging from the rift. The visitors didn't look like ships or creatures in any conventional sense. They appeared as distortions in reality itself, patches of space where natural laws seemed to bend and warp. Their movements were eerily fluid, with portions of their forms occasionally phasing out of visible perception. Sunwoo nodded, his hand steady on controls designed centuries in the future. The neural interfaces along his arms pulsed brighter as he connected more deeply with the ship systems. "This time we're ready," he said, and there was steel in his voice, the resolve of a man who had watched his world end once and would not allow it to happen again. "Reality anchors at full charge," Jun reported. "Deploy on my mark." Sunyu ordered. 3, 2, 1. Mark. The Impossible's primary weapon system activated. There was no beam of light, no conventional projectile. Instead, waves of energy pulsed outward in patterns that seemed to fold through dimensions beyond normal perception. The fleet ships fired their own modified anchors simultaneously, creating a complex web of interdimensional energy. When the pulses reached the emerging visitors, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The creatures' fluid movements suddenly jerked and slowed. Their semi-transparent forms became more solid, more defined, forced fully into the constraints of three-dimensional space. "First phase successful," Park announced, checking the readings. "They're anchored to our reality." "Fleet vessels engage with conventional weapons," Samu commanded through the comm system. The Earth ships opened fire with advanced plasma cannons and quantum disruptors, weapons that would have passed harmlessly through the visitors in their natural state, now bound to Earth's dimension by the reality anchors. The entities reacted violently to the assault, their forms contorting in what might have been pain. "They're attempting to retreat," Minute reported as several of the visitors tried to move back toward the rift. Not this time, Sunwoo said grimly. Activate the temporal displacement array. This was the Impossible's most advanced weapon system, the one that had been most difficult for even Admiral Choi to believe. Not just a weapon that destroyed its target, but one that erased it from the timeline itself. The ship hummed as energy built in its core, channeling through systems that defied current understanding of physics. Park felt a strange sensation, as if reality itself was holding its breath. When the weapon fired, the visual effect was subtle, just a brief shimmer in the space around the rift and the visitors, but the sensor readings told the true story. The entities weren't simply destroyed, they were unmade, their existence reconed from reality in a way that left only the faintest quantum echo. The rift itself began to contract, the temporal displacement effects sealing the breach between dimensions. Continue firing until the rift is completely closed, Sunmo ordered. For 10 minutes, the Impossible maintained its assault on the dimensional tear, while the fleet ships handled any visitors that had fully emerged. Gradually, the rift shrank until it collapsed with a final pulse of energy that rippled through normal space. Silence fell on the bridge as the crew stared at the now empty region of space, where the threat had been scanned for any remaining dimensional anomalies. Sunmo directed his voice, showing the first signs of fatigue. Mina worked her controls, performing the most thorough scan the advanced sensors were capable of. Nothing. Captain. Space of time has returned to normal parameters. The rift is completely sealed. A collective breath seemed to release across the bridge. Park found herself gripping the edge of her console, her knuckles white from tension. She hadn't realized she was holding. Send word to Admiral Choi. Sunwoo ordered. The primary incursion has been repelled. As the fleet regrouped and began the journey back to Earth, Park joined Sunwoo at the viewport below them. The blue planet rotated peacefully, its billions of inhabitants unaware of how close they had come to extinction. Will they try again? She asked quietly. Possibly, Sunwoo admitted, but we've changed the equation now in my timeline. They caught us completely unprepared. They established multiple bridgeheads before we even understood what we were fighting. He gestured to the fleet ships surrounding them. Now we have the technology and the knowledge. If they return, we'll be waiting. Park studied the stars beyond Earth, thinking about the strange new reality they now inhabited, one where humanity had glimpsed its future destruction and found a way to prevent it. What happens now? She asked as they watched the stars. We've changed the future. This ship came from your timeline. It doesn't exist anymore. That was always the mission, Sue replied, a genuine smile crossing his face. For the first time since she'd met him, the expression transformed him, lifting years of grief and hardship to ensure that future never happens. And the Impossible. This ship doesn't belong in our time. Sunbo ran his hand along the smooth control panel almost affectionately. Neither do I, Commander, but here we are. This ship represents knowledge humanity wasn't meant to have for centuries. We can use it to guide development, to prepare for threats we now know exist. We build a new future. Park suggested. Exactly, not the one I came from, but something better, something we choose, rather than something forced upon us by catastrophe. 2 days later, the Impossible entered Earth orbit to a hero's welcome from those few who knew what had truly occurred. As the advanced warship settled into its new role as guardian and guide for humanity's development, Park stood on the observation deck with Sunwoo watching the sunrise over the Pacific Ocean. The warship that shouldn't exist yet orbited Earth, a sentinel from a future that would never come to pass, and the herald of one humanity would forge anew. Ready for our next mission, Captain? Park asked. Sunwoo nodded, his eyes clear and focused on the future, a future he would help build rather than merely remember. Let's make it a good one, he said.